Alright, so my views are down and I need to upload a video in order to keep them up, so I'm just going to make a little video about Across the Spider-Verse because I enjoyed that and I thought it was a really good movie. So here are my thoughts about Across the Spider-Verse. Also, before we get into the video, let me know in the comments about what you think about this whole dual screen setup. This is my first time doing it, so actually, you know what, give me a second. There you go. That's how you do a 2-monitor setup. I don't even fully know where I'm supposed to begin with this movie. It's just 2.5-hour long sequel to a movie that I saw 2 weeks ago. So there's a lot of stuff I can talk about here. What I've seen a fair few videos talking about are how people were turned off by the ending of the movie being a cliffhanger. With a movie that long, I get it that you would expect the movie to all wrap up like perfectly in a neat little bow, given that it's 2 hours long and already a sequel. But I saw a clip from a long time ago that addressed it as Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 1. So I was already expecting a cliffhanger ending going into it, and I was unfortunately spoiled for it. Granted, I saw the movie 3 weeks late, so I can't really complain about being spoiled, because I already knew there was going to be a cliffhanger ending before going into the movie. But either way, it was a pretty good ending in my opinion. It wrapped up enough about the original story. Like, you can definitely tell that there was Part 1 as one movie and Part 2 as a different movie. Like, they wrapped up pretty much the entire narrative. They told a good story in Across the Spider-Verse with a good beginning, a middle, and an end point. And then they also leave Beyond the Spider-Verse to have a good beginning, middle, and end point. There's just a natural kind of break between the two parts. Plus, we'd have to wait like another 5 years for this movie to come out, and it would probably be like 4 hours long. Also, it's not really half a movie from what I've seen some people talking about. It's definitely its own film. Like, it has, like I've mentioned, has a beginning, middle, and end. And that ending point, Miles escapes Spider Society. He goes home, although ends up in the wrong universe, which is where they branch off to season 3. I feel like if they were to end the movie with Miles going into the go-home machine and just ending up wherever, I feel like there wouldn't be nearly as many people complaining about it being half a movie as there are now. But given that they were like, oh, by the way, we're making a sequel, he's not in the right universe, then a lot of people were complaining about it because they were like, oh, I want to see what happens next, when they were really, it's just the equivalent of like a teaser trailer at the end of the movie. Which is something I actually really enjoy. Some of my favorite cliffhanger endings are like that, where they wrap up the story and then at the very end, they're like, oh, by the way, we're doing more. And they did that in this movie, go figure, and I really liked how they ended it, despite what some people may say. So I know I've talked about this with literally every single animated movie I've ever covered on the channel, which is like 2. But the animation in this was absolutely breathtaking. Little known secret, before I uploaded anything on this channel, and before I was old enough, and before my voice changed, I was going to be a storytime animator.
Hi. I'm gonna be telling you guys a story today.
So I understand how hard animating can be. Granted, I was like 11 years old and drawing on an iPad, and these guys are professionally paid adults who get to work 8 hours a day. But regardless, this must have taken, I understand why it took 5 years to come out, because this was absolutely breathtaking, both visually, storytelling-wise, just a great movie all around. This is one of those movies that I can't even fully comprehend how it was made, and that's one of my favorite part of movies, is understanding how they were made and the filmmaking aspect behind it. But I don't understand how this movie was animated, because it has all those dots that you can see here on Miles' face. You can see all of the dots like they have in comic book drawings, but it's also a 3D animated film, so I don't know how they made that, and it's something I'm actually very intrigued about now that I come to talk about it. One thing I really liked about this movie is how all of the different universes were animated with their own sort of art style, if you will. Like, Gwen's universe was a lot of pinks and blues, and Miles' universe is that sort of dot style I talked about earlier. And there was a Lego universe at some point, which I really loved. You'll get to hear more about my thoughts on that later. But every universe had its own little creative art style. It had its own color palette, own style of drawing, which is something I loved. It's going that extra mile and making sure everything looks visually different in the movie, which I can't praise the animators enough. So I don't know how much I'm going to be able to describe this without getting copyright claimed, but the music in this movie slapped. Every villain theme in this movie was amazing. The Spot as a villain was fantastic, which I'll hear more about later, but his theme alone is great. The Spider-Man 2099 was amazing. I'm not gonna lie and say that there haven't been times I was like doing chores around the house and I was like humming because it's such a bop of a theme song. It really gets stuck in your head and it really helps out that kind of like villainy, futuristic synth kind of powerful futuristic Spider-Man, essentially, basically. The Spot's theme was great. It was menacing. It was everything that I wanted it to be. Which segues into my next point, talking about the Spot as a villain. I loved at the start of the movie how he was just this comedic, kind of one-off villain of the week character. But you slowly, over the course of the movie, see him degrade into this, like, monster, this supervillain that can do whatever he wants. And I just loved his whole little progression into that state of being a villain. Not only how the animation changed about him, how he was like every frame was drawn differently. I also just loved the entire concept of him just can summon portals everywhere and can jump across the multiverse, which is a perfect villain for a multiverse set story. Like the Prowler as a villain in Into the Spider-Verse was a great villain. It was your standard Spider-Man villain. Oh, the uncle's somebody bad. But this movie really took advantage of that whole multiverse aspect with the villain of it and tying that into some type of multiverse situation. And I mean, I feel like everybody talked about this even before the movie came out, but I mean, look at this. Look at the amount of cameos that were in this movie. I'm not necessarily the biggest Spider-Man fan. Like, I've seen all the live-action movies, and I've played the first mission of Spider-Man Miles Morales, and I've seen, like, this movie now. But, like, I don't know who Spider-Man India is, or the Spectacular Spider-Man, or the PS4 Spider-Man even, or that guy with the bag on his head. I don't know who those are. But it was just so cool to see all of the different iterations of Spider-Man, all, like, 60 years of history of the Spider-Man universe being combined into this one film. And it was just so cool to see all of those little payoffs. And if I were a hardcore fan, I feel like I probably would have had a stroke in the movie theater when you got to see the Spider Society for the first time. But there was just so many little cameos in this movie that even if I didn't understand them, I still really appreciated. I also really like how they did a bunch of things in the movie that they didn't necessarily had to do, but they did anyways to, like, make the movie better. Which was just including those little tiny jokes like the Lego universe. I absolutely loved that. They didn't have to put that in the movie by any means. They could have just gone off without it. Or that Spider-Man therapist joke in the whole Spider Society chase scene. Or even just, like, all of the little spider people that have their little roles and quirks in the movie. So many things like that were just going the extra mile to make sure the movie is great, and there's tons of little rewatchability things. A lot of that is done with the animation style and, like, frame rates and stuff that I don't fully understand. But it was all just made to go the extra mile, and I think it was fantastic because of it. Also, I would just like to point out that you can tell that this movie was written, or, like, they already knew what was going to happen after they wrote Into the Spider. Okay, there's an ad. What the hell? Also, this is one of those movies that you can tell was already fully planned out by the time they had finished writing Into the Spider-Verse. Like, there are so many things that you don't even realize in Into the Spider-Verse that, looking back on it, you're like, oh, that's what they meant. Like, the whole Miles' dad being a cop subplot was something that I don't think anyone could have ever predicted would play such a big role in Across the Spider-Verse when it was set up in that first movie. Because it was just, you shrug it off in the first movie. You're like, so what, he's a cop, yada, yada, yada. But then when Miguel O'Hara explains canon events and Miles has that realization moment along with the audience, it's such a payoff, and they pay it off so well, and I just love it. Also, with the whole Earth 42 Miles being the Prowler, and the whole, like, the spider that bit him not being from his universe type of plot twist at the end of the movie, that was all really thought out, and I'm really surprised that I didn't get it, like, immediately after the spider glitched into the Spider-Verse. Like, I'm really surprised that I didn't piece that together or figure it out at all until, like, they had to reveal it Into the Spider-Verse, and I was so surprised, and it was just, it's such a great, so many little payoffs that you didn't even realize were setups. Also, just a message to me who is, like, trying to be a screenwriter, and every other writer out there. I know you're all on strike right now, but I'm gonna give you all a lesson. Stop trying to be funny. Okay? Comedy has peaked with this joke.
Hey man, why did you create that guy? I did.
And also when he calls Gwen Stacy emo, I think those are two of my favorite lines, like, in any movie ever.
Oh, that's his jacket, emo. Where's Miles?
They were just so funny, and they really hammer home that, like, goofy cop character. And they're, like, some of the funniest lines I've ever heard. Also, as one final little note for the animation and stuff, this is something that I haven't seen a single movie do before. Granted, I don't watch a whole load of animated movies. Like, I get it's not a genre and it's more of an art form, but I don't go to the theater and I don't go sit down and watch every new Pixar movie. I just watch what I hear is good. So I've never seen a movie do this before, which is incorporating live action with the animated parts. I have a feeling that's going to be a bigger plot point in Across the Spider-Verse. Maybe it'll merge with the MCU universe and we'll get Miles in Secret Wars or something. That's just an idea I'm hearing as I'm improvising the script, but I think that's a pretty good idea. I can't even imagine how you would incorporate live action into animation like that. Like, that just must be so difficult, and it's another huge props to the animators. But it's also, I loved pointing it out when it came on the screen, because it was just such a visually appealing thing to look at, because it's something you never quite expect, and it's something that just catches you off guard every time you look at it. You're like, it's Uncle Ben, and it's just freaks you out, and it's such a good, like, cool way they could have shown that stuff. So that brings me to the end of all of my talking points about this movie. Is it worth the 96 and 95% on Rotten Tomatoes? I would say so. I thought it was a great movie. I loved the animation. I thought it was excellently thought out and just overall well written, well voice acted. The voice acting cast did great. The score was great. Pretty much every aspect of this film was at minimum very good, and at best, like, some of the best I've ever seen. So I think it does earn its rating. I think critics are right about this movie. Which brings me to the end of the video. This whole video was very improv, so let me know what you think of this, because I didn't write a script for anything. Subscribe, as always, so I can pass NASA in subscribers and buy a planet from them. And like the video if you liked it. I'm not going to force you to, but if you liked it, I'd appreciate it. And let me know what you thought of the movie in the comments, because I like reading those. And I'll see you guys in my next video, whenever that may be. I'll see you later.